What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. We are live on Spreaker.com, YouTube, and for the Apple Podcast and Spotify audience, you are listening to this podcast pre-recorded, but I'm joined by a phenomenal guest, a guy that's been super pumped to join the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. We've been talking about getting him on the show for about a week or two now, and the day has come. We are here. Kyle Hughes of Trainwreck Sports on the line. What's going on, Kyle?
Hey, not too much, Ryan. I'm honestly, like you said, I've been looking forward to this for a while now. So it's time to throw down the gloves. Let's get to it.
I like that analogy, to drop the gloves, or maybe put the gloves on, because the topic that we are going to start off with, I had a very impassioned speech, if you will. A little bit of a call-out, if you will, towards Floyd Mayweather Jr., and it was shortly after Manny Pacquiao's destruction of Keith Thurman, a fight that no one gave Manny a shot to win, but me, apparently. I felt like I was the only one that was picking him to win amongst all my friends. We all kind of placed our own bets and said, who do you think will win, Pacquiao or Thurman? I was the only one that thought that Pacquiao would win. He did win, not to toot my own horn, but I was pretty happy I won that bet. Outside of that,
yeah, I mean,
what was that?
Man, that was wild. Like, to back you up with that, I realistically always been a Pac fan, so I probably would have just put the money on him just for the support. But being honest, yeah, I realistically, a smart man probably would have put his money on Thurman.
Right. The betting lines were definitely the safe money was Keith Thurman, just based on the age, based on his age, based on the fighters that he's beat, the fact that he's undefeated. Everything was kind of trending towards Keith Thurman using Manny Pacquiao as that proverbial stepping stone. Pacquiao did his thing. And then I went on the podcast, did my thing, and talked about why I believe the time is now. There's no time better than now to see Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather Jr. share the squared circle once again. What do you say about that? What are your thoughts on the likelihood or the prospects of Floyd versus Manny too? Take us into that. What do you think about that?
From a realistic perspective, you got Pacquiao, who's coming off of his most recent bout that no one thought he was really going to have a chance in. And now you're also talking Floyd Mayweather Jr., who is just as good at ducking punches as he is ducking fights. Realistically, I don't think it's going to happen. As much as I, as a general fighting fan, would love to see it, I just don't see the likelihood of it. It seems like boxing matches, at least every one that I've ever dealt with or had experience in, which, Floyd Mayweather Jr., Manny Pacquiao, really any of the big names, they like to talk their talk first. They let it simmer down, so it kind of gives everyone a little taste. And then, out of nowhere, you see a tweet from Bleacher Report that, details of a contract have been signed and it's going to happen in MGM Grand. So, could I see that happening with Maypac too? Yeah. I could see this coming out of nowhere, give it maybe 4 or 6 months, and we could see, hey, come February, we're going to have a Maypac too. But, again, if the betting line is where you're interested, I would put the money on that no fight.
Now, the interesting thing is, as always, in today's day and age, when talk is thrown around about a particular sports topic, whether it's Mayweather, Manny 2, or any other sports topic, the subject matter being Floyd and Manny, they actually started chirping back and forth with one another. Floyd saying that he's a self-made success and he doesn't need any one opponent to come back to. He's content with his 50-0 career. Doesn't need to fight Manny. Manny needs to fight him. The whole narrative that Floyd's got so much money, he doesn't know what to do with it, and he doesn't have to fight anymore. And then Manny Pacquiao says, well, you showed up to my fight. You were ringside. It seems like you're trying to stay relevant by being near me in the boxing ring. Both of them have pretty fair points, and I like the idea that they have actually begun somewhat talking trash with one another, which usually, where there's smoke, there is fire in that regard, because when two fighters talk trash to one another, it usually does set the stage for something, whether it's a fight or somewhat of a face-off or a little bit of a verbal battle in public. I think that there's legs to this. I think that not necessarily that the fight is possible, but I do think boxing fans, true boxing fans like yourself and like myself, know that that first fight was not the best representation of either fighter, and maybe, just maybe, if they went back into that boxing ring one more time, the fight would be a better fight. What do you think of that?
I see that I don't know about, because realistically, kind of like I said earlier, and I mean, we were talking about this, in the weeks leading up to tonight, just, me and you talking on the side, that Mayweather is Mayweather. He's going to do what he does. He ducks. He's the best defensive boxer of all time. He's the best boxer of all time. And then you got Pacquiao, who's kind of, it almost seems like he's been an underdog in any of the major events he's been in. Obviously, he's had a long, storied career, so not to say that he's never been given credit. But it just seems like, especially when you get him in a ring with someone like Thurman or Mayweather, I mean, it seems like he's not given the fair chance. So I feel like that he's always kind of had that rep on him. In terms of just the smoke to fire and giving this thing legs, yeah, well, that's kind of like I was saying. I feel like realistically, this is going to turn up in 4 to 6 months. Either we're never going to hear this again, Maypac 2 is going to die right now, or in 4 to 6 months, we're going to see a Bleacher Report tweet that, terms have been agreed to. I feel like with boxing, when there's trash talk, there's contract talk.
Right.
I just think that's kind of is what it is. The camps try to get themselves interested. So
right.
I think Pacquiao is trying to stay relevant by, chirping with Mayweather? Probably. Do I think Mayweather wants to build up a little bit more money? And whether it's actually in a fight or just get, even the talk, I'm sure talking gives him money. So realistically, they're both probably just trying to do what they can to keep themselves in. Whether that actually turns into something, I mean, I think it's way too early to tell. I'm skeptical, but I mean, I'm hopeful. I'd love to see a rematch. I'd love to see a better fight.
Right, and that's kind of where I'm at, because I think boxing kind of needs a better fight between them, between both Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. And for me, as a boxing purist, like I'd be the first to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of Floyd Mayweather outside the ring, but inside the ring, I'm a massive fan of Floyd Mayweather, just due to the fact that this guy's dedicated, over 2 decades of his life to this sport, stayed in peak physical condition during both of his quote-unquote retirements, came back, fought the who's who. Granted, I don't think he fought those fighters at their best. There was always some sort of a business angle for him to take those fights, and a reason why he fought those fighters when he fought them. He was a very calculated, savvy businessman. But I think there is legs to the fact, and I want to throw this in there too for the audience. Shortly after Floyd fought Manny the first time, there were a lot of reports out there that Manny had a bad shoulder injury, and I thought, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear excuses from Manny. He lost. It's just call it a day. Just say that you had a rough night at the office, and that's it. But watching that fight as recently as last week, when I started talking about the idea of possibility that Floyd and Manny would fight again, I really do think he was hurt. I really don't think he was 100%. Maybe he was 70%. Maybe he was 80%. Maybe he was 50%. But regardless, I want to see the best Manny Pacquiao fight the best Floyd Mayweather. And I don't think we had either one of those on that night. I believe it was May 2nd, 2015. So I guess we will see, Kyle. I guess we will see. If you were a betting man, would you pick Floyd again, or do you think that Manny Pacquiao is a better fighter than he was 4 years ago?
If I'm a bettor, I'm putting money on Manny Pacquiao solely for the fact that the value in picking Floyd Mayweather is not going to pay you anything.
Right.
You're going to need to put down $2,000 to win $100.
Right.
So, I mean, if I'm a betting man, I'm just putting money on Manny for the value. Now, to your point of him being injured, yeah, I mean, I bought into it right from the beginning. I mean, I watched Manny Pacquiao's career. There's no way that he was fighting in the biggest boxing match, arguably, of our generation, one of the biggest, arguably, of all time. And there's no way he was fighting in that, 100%, given just the fight you watched against Thurman.
Right.
I mean, he looks a night and day difference in that fight versus the one years ago versus Mayweather. So, yeah, I mean, I put stock in the injury 100%. And, if I was putting betting on what the fight happened, no. But if I'm putting money on the fighter, if the fight were to happen, I'm going to put money on Manny just for the value.
And a part of me, too, recognizes that as unique and as special as Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor was, which it definitely was, I don't want to see Floyd Mayweather walk out of the boxing ring, leave the sport of boxing, with a win over a guy that was 0-0 in professional boxing. I get it that, Conor did his thing the first few rounds and hung with Floyd Mayweather in that boxing ring, and all respect to him, all credit to him for that. But
right.
I want to see Floyd fight his best rival at his best and his rival at his best. So that's how I feel about that, and I hope we do see it. I really hope we do see it.
I think honestly, like, the boxing world, just, listening audience right now, I think everyone would genuinely love to see it again. If not just for the names, people, like I said, people that feel like that, they felt like they got gypped. They just felt like they didn't get what they were due. Mm-hmm. I mean, hell, SNL literally made a cold open skit mocking it. So
right, I mean, they did.
For what it is, like I think the world would love to get a fair shot at Maypac 2. But you got Manny Pacquiao in his 40s and Mayweather at 50-0. So I'm not going to put too much stock in the fight happening. But God, would I love to see it.
I couldn't agree more. Moving on to the next subject matter, fantasy football. I sent the shot, the tweet heard around the world. I got a lot of DMs, believe it or not, about this tweet that, if I go back onto my Twitter, I tweet, at least 15 to 20 times a day. So it would take me, it would take me a bit to find it, but maybe you can help me out. What was the biggest shock factor that my tweet had? Maybe you can lay it out for the audience for us.
I mean, well, like you said, there's 15 times that you're putting out some hot content. So, if I'm being completely honest, which one are you referring to? I can probably name a couple.
That's awesome. I'm referring to the one that refers to if I am a fantasy football player, which I am, and I'm a 6-time champ. I'll throw that in there too. If I'm a 6-time fantasy football champion, and I have my party with my buddies where we put the lotto balls in the roller, and the balls are rolled and they pop out, and then they say who picks where, and I win the lottery and I pick first overall. I'm sitting on the clock. I'm about to hand my card in to the commissioner and announce my pick. I'm not picking Saquon Barkley. I'm not picking Ezekiel Elliott. And I might be picking either Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey, especially if it's a PPR points per reception league. And the reason I say that is because Saquon Barkley, I feel like, is the only guy on the Giants roster. I feel like he's all they got. They lose Odell Beckham. They have Golden Tate in a suspension, which will probably get appealed, but the Giants are not going to be a great team this year. I worry for Saquon Barkley's fantasy value because of that. Ezekiel Elliott is holding out. Maybe he'll get, maybe he'll miss some time. And Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey are basically two players built into one with the production that they provide as receiving backs. So what do you say to that? What are your thoughts on that?
I say in a PPR league that it may not be the worst move. I still would, regardless of PPR. So here's the thing. If I am the GM of the fantasy team that goes second to you in the lottery, and you walk up there and you pass on Saquon or Zeke intentionally, I am personally shaking your hand and buying you a bottle of wine. If you leave Saquon Barkley on the table for me, regardless of your scoring, I'm giving you a high five, a hug, bottle of wine. It's on me. You just basically handed me the championship at a running back's perspective.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's not a... I've got about 4 or 5 fantasy drafts lined up this year. In my 4 out of 5 last year, I took home 2 titles. So,
That's awesome.
I also, to my credit, have a fair share of long victories in a fantasy season, and I have done more damage with. So to be fair, 1 year I did have Alvin Kamara, so I'm not saying that he's not a good pick. But I traded for Saquon mid-season, and that arguably won me the title.
Wow.
Regardless of DPR. Saquon came in literally, if you don't have a good running back, point-wise, PPR or not, if you don't have a good running back, you are absolutely screwed.
Right.
And
that I'd agree with for sure.
Saquon saved my season and got me that title. So if you pass on him, I'm, like I said, I'm treating you.
But I do acknowledge that Saquon Barkley had a phenomenal season last year, one of the best rookie running back seasons probably of all time, to be quite honest. But aren't you worried a little bit about the prospects of him putting those numbers up again without an Odell Beckham, with a one year older Eli Manning, with maybe Daniel Jones at quarterback, who a lot of people are, I'm seeing some Twitter videos of him in practice, and it is practice. We're talking about practice in the words of Allen Iverson, but he does not look too good to me. So I'm thinking that maybe Saquon Barkley will take a step back and we'll have a year similar to what Todd Gurley had a couple years ago, where he was really the only offensive threat that the Rams had and was pretty much boxed in. The box was stacked, 8 men in the box, and he just didn't do as well. So I'm thinking first overall, if I'm picking first overall and it's a snake draft, then I'm picking in the 20s, mid-20s, maybe 30s, depending on the size of the league. My next pick, I got to get a guaranteed guy. I can't get a guy that might not have the production that he had last year based on the fact that he's really the only offensive threat that team has. But what do you say to that? What do you think of that thought process?
So, this is coming from an Eagles fan, too, by the way. If you're going to, and again, we're talking about practice, but if you're going to put even an ounce of stock in any kind of video that you are, and now, to interrupt myself, you're talking about a lot of Buffalo fans, a lot of Bills fans as well, that are seeing videos of Josh Allen and, the offensive line, and they're like, okay, here we go, things are looking good. So
right.
if you're putting even an ounce of stock in, training camp videos, then you have to be aware of Daniel Jones, overthrowing a receiver that apparently was just a throwaway, according to, I believe it was Golden Tate, or was it Saquon? One of them said that there was apparently a busted play. Daniel threw away the ball, which is fine. And as an Eagles fan, I'm giving them credit, benefit of the doubt. Realistically, it's training camp. I don't really give a damn about what Daniel Jones is doing until we get to even preseason.
Right.
So if you're just going off of practice, then yeah, okay, I guess maybe Saquon, you have reason to be concerned. And Christian McCaffrey, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure he was the highest scoring fantasy running back last year.
Yep.
So, he's got his value there. I just think realistically, if you're going bell cow, who's going to get the carries? Who's going to get you the points, especially in standard? Zeke and Saquon are, they are the offense.
Yeah.
I think in both cases, they are the offense.
Well, one thing, too, that I like about Alvin Kamara that I didn't like about him last year is the fact that he did share the backfield. You had a real solid tandem in New Orleans with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Now Mark Ingram is actually in Baltimore, which that was a free agent move that for whatever reason I completely forgot about it. That's a move that it just blew past my mind of keeping track of everything Bills or Sabres or MMA or whatever. That's just a move that completely fell by the wayside to me. That move to me of Mark Ingram going from the Saints to the Ravens, I think it actually boosts Alvin Kamara's fantasy stock to what you were saying, knowing that Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott are the offenses for the Giants and Cowboys. I think Alvin Kamara is going to take on an even bigger role now that Drew Brees is 1 year older and now that he doesn't have that RB2 that'll take touches away from him.
Well, now I'm going to skip Bayless myself and go against what I just said and kind of attack you on your heels for a second. Do you honestly think Alvin Kamara being the RB1, being, Mark Ingram being gone, that's not going to have defenses stacking the box on the Saints offense at all?
I think with the Saints offense in comparison to the Giants, the Saints offense has more ability to do more spread out things. Whereas the Giants, they don't have, I don't even know, outside of Golden Tate, I don't even know who the wide receivers are. And I'm not saying that as a sign of disrespect, but I heard something about and for the record here, this flows into the conversation. I heard something about the Giants yesterday that I never thought I'd hear about any team having interest in this player ever. That the Giants interviewed or visited with Kelvin Benjamin yesterday.
Yep.
I hope that that's not true, because if that's true, I don't even know what to say to that. And
as an Eagles fan, I am praying to God I hope it's true.
Now,
send Kelvin directly to MetLife.
That would be great as a Bills fan, because they play Kelvin Benjamin week 2 if he does go to the Giants. Week 2 they would go up against him, and I think that's easy pickings. I mean, the guy quit last year for Buffalo, and honestly, I thought he quit on the Chiefs too. But yeah, I mean, I'm very, and as far as McCaffrey goes too, I've had McCaffrey every year that he's been in the league, and he has just been, for what you said about Saquon Barkley arguably winning you the league, the same I think could be said for McCaffrey. I think I've won 2 of the years that he has been on my team. Since he's been in the league, however many years he's been in the league, I've won some leagues with him on my team. So I don't know, man. And this whole Ezekiel Elliott holdout situation, if I'm picking first overall, I don't want any reason to second guess picking someone, whether it's a holdout or the fact that he's the only guy on the offense. I'm just a little bit leery of that. But as you said, if I don't take Saquon Barkley in a fantasy league, you'll buy me a bottle of wine. So I'm really making out both ways then, right?
Yeah, I mean, you either get a fantasy trophy or a bottle of wine. I don't see any ways of going back.
That's awesome. So you're a huge combat sports fan. You were talking to me about boxing in the beginning of the show, from the top of the show. And I've talked about this man on numerous amount of occasions, the notorious one, Conor McGregor. You posted that you didn't really start getting into MMA until, you started watching Conor. There was just something about him that you were kind of mesmerized by, and that you really enjoyed watching him fight, and you enjoyed the Diaz fights and stuff like that. Where are you as a fan of Conor McGregor? What do you think should be his next step in his career?
So there's kind of 2 sides to this. So basically my interest in MMA has always relatively been there, but it was never what it was until I started witnessing just what McGregor was. I mean, if you ask Dana White, the MMA, or the UFC, not the MMA, the UFC was not what it was before McGregor. And you still have some of the same people that are fighting in the UFC before McGregor. And it was not what it was until he came into the octagon. So I've had nights, I've spent many, many hours at Buffalo Wild Wings wrapped in an Irish flag with my Notorious shirt on. I mean, he just realistically, for some reason, I get the chills. I don't know if it's the effort, the workload, the work ethic, something about what he does to prepare himself for a fight. It just resonates. And I think, regardless of all of his outside the ring antics, and I emphasize the all, regardless of all of it, I don't think you'll have an easy time finding someone that doesn't respect what McGregor did for the sport and doesn't respect just what he is as a fighter. I mean, the confidence oozes out of him. I mean, with every word, with every step, with every boneless arm swing, the guy is cocky and ready to go. So there's just never been a point where I've watched a McGregor fight and thought, all right, well, it's just, this is a fight. Where's the next one? That brings everyone's attention. That's full gravity.
I couldn't agree more with you, and I can definitely attest to that, because I've been a fan of the sport for a long time, dating back to when it was barely even on TV, and to see his career from the beginning, The first fight of his that I watched, and I've actually never told this story, and this is a pretty interesting story. The first fight that I ever watched of Conor's was 2011, maybe 2012. There was this Cage Warriors event, which was an Ireland mixed martial arts company, and this guy walks out. He's very, very skinny, very bony, very frail, had no beard, just no tattoos, nothing. And the fight was actually on Facebook. The event was on Facebook, and there was a fighter by the name of Paddy Houlihan, the hooligan Houlihan. He was the main event, co-main event, and Conor McGregor was like the third fight from the co-main event. So like his fight, the co-main, and the main. I couldn't even remember who the main event even was. And I saw Conor walk out, draped in the Irish flag, the Ireland flag, and had no sponsors on his trunks, no banner hung from the cage. It was just the Ireland flag, and he knocked the guy out in probably about 40 seconds. And I said to myself, "Who the hell is that? Who the hell is that guy?"
And how do we get more of it?
Right. And just to see that, I was watching it on a laptop and wondering who the heck that guy was. And to know that guy fought Floyd Mayweather in what will probably, as we alluded to earlier, his last fight in his boxing career, it really puts things in perspective, just the rise that he had as this PR machine that I think right now I have a tough time wondering what his next step is for the first time in his career, where you always knew what was next. Whether he lost to Nate Diaz, you knew that rematch was coming. Whether he beat Eddie Alvarez, you knew that he was teasing the fight with Floyd Mayweather, as ridiculous as it seemed at the time for it to actually happen. He usually knows what's next for his career, and he usually embarks on that. But right now, I don't know what's next. I hate to say this, but it's almost like for the first time in his career, the sport is kind of passing him by a little bit. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, kind of unfortunately, I don't disagree. I think for probably the first time since he broke out on the scene, maybe even the first time since that fight in Ireland. I mean, this is arguably the first time you could call, Conor McGregor irrelevant.
Right.
I think this is the first time we're in this, in the history of the UFC since he broke into action. This is the first time where I think there's actually, minimal interest to even see him back. I think people they got their fill. They got what he was all about, and I think it's almost tired at this point. I don't agree. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I would pay front row if I had the money. I would pay front row to see any fight he was in, whether I knew he was going to win or lose. I mean, the guy is just a ticket. He's a box office, ticket guaranteed sellout.
Right.
So I think realistically he's going to bring attention, but I think to the general public, he still talks. He's still on Twitter. He's still trash talking, and it's almost hard to back that up when you see what happened with Khabib, and you see how he, kind of lost control mentally and threw the bike rack through the bus and trashed, Khabib's religion and his family and Mayweather's, family and everything like that. So, yeah, I understand why people are tired of it, and they really probably have no interest in really, seeing him, headline an event. But you can't possibly tell me, as a fan of, mixed martial arts, that if you saw McGregor was even the co-main event at the UFC event that just got announced in MSG for November, if you saw he was on that card anywhere, that's a sellout instantly.
Right. And I think that's if I were to I always like to look ahead at what's next. For Christ's sake, I actually just watched Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar last night, and no more than 5 seconds after the fight was over, I said, well, Frankie might move down to 135, and Max Holloway might fight Alexander Volkanovski. Like, literally,
Yep.
That's how it always is in MMA. You're always wondering what's next as soon as a fight's over. I almost feel like, in a way, our minds are prepared for that just based on the fact that the UFC is this machine that just keeps on churning out these fights after fights after fights with so many events throughout a calendar year that they've programmed the fans' brains to think, oh, what's next? And for me to sit here and to talk with you on this podcast and wonder what is next for the biggest superstar that the sport of MMA has ever seen, and to not know, to literally not know the answer to that, I think that's interesting. I think it's fun, but I think it's interesting as well. And I appreciate you saying, as a fan of Conor McGregor, that you do acknowledge that there are people that have grown a little bit tiresome with his whole gimmick and his whole act. But I raise this question to you. If Conor McGregor had won against Khabib Nurmagomedov, which is a big F because, frankly, I thought he got completely dominated in that fight. But if he had won that fight, the story would be we wouldn't even be having this conversation, right?
So first of all, I need to ask you how long you sat there prepping Khabib's name.
A little while.
There's no way you just rattled that off first try. I just need to put that out there.
I did.
Second of all, you're totally right. So if McGregor wins that fight, I think it's hands down, without a doubt, who is he fighting next? It's not when. So here's the thing. I still think McGregor is a when will we see him next, not an if. I do not think he is done. Who that's against, I don't know. When that's against them, I don't know. So to your point, yeah, it's really weird being uncertain of McGregor's next move. If he wins that fight, it's a lock. We may not see him until November in MSG because of just everything that transpired after the fight with Khabib. I'm not even going to try the last name. I literally cannot do it. So if he wins that fight, it's a lock. We see him whenever that suspension ends up, and we see him whenever he's eligible or healthy to fight again. Now I think it's just a little bit more of a kind of a waiting game, of a betting game. And I'm telling you, I see him coming back as a when, not if.
I think he will be back. I do think he will be back. I don't think he's done, but I feel like as a fan, there has been plenty of opportunities for him to fight someone beyond Khabib, post Khabib. I thought the fight with Donald Cerrone would have made perfect sense. That was a fight that was thrown out there, but something that he kind of just snubbed and said, no, I don't really want that. And then the fight with Justin Gaethje, they was reported that they offered him that as well, but then it was reported that Conor hurt his hand in training. So it's one of those things. I look at it like this. There's times where fighters don't really know what's next in their career, and legally the UFC has to offer these fighters 3 fights a year. If they turn the 3 fights down, it's basically it resets itself, and then they offer them another 3 fights, and it's in their contracts that they have to get offered 3 fights a year. And he's denied 2 fights. So my thing is, he's denied 2 fights and has said to himself, well, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to rest up, going to get the surgeries that I need, fix what needs to be fixed, and then fight the winner of Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier at MSG or in December at the December card in Las Vegas. I don't think that's...
The only thing that I'm hesitant about with that, though, realistically, is apparently there's, a decent amount of stock in Khabib versus... the Diaz brothers, Nate. I've heard stock in those two. So realistically, even if Khabib is to walk away with the win here, I don't see any stock in McGregor being next, just because of. I think the UFC is smart enough where they would. I don't know if there's enough money that could make a rematch of that fight make sense. Just because I think it was so toxic the first time.
I definitely agree with you there. I think Dana White, though, is very money hungry, as everybody knows, and he knows that the rematch would do big numbers. I mean, it would be the biggest fight that they could possibly put on, but it's not for the right reasons. And I don't know if, being that McGregor lost so badly the first time, Was his face completely destroyed? No. Did he look like he was, completely dejected throughout the entire fight? No, he was fighting, and it was a back and forth fight. But really, anywhere the fight went, Khabib had a counter to anything that he threw. There was always an answer. He had all the answers for Conor's game. He even dropped him at one point in the fight. So,
yep.
That being said, I always say, like, when these fighters ask for immediate rematches, I think that's a death sentence to a career, because if you lose a fight and you're dominated and you ask for an immediate rematch and then you lose to that guy again, then what's next? And I would hate...
Yeah, you lose a lot of stock.
Right, I would hate to see that happen to Conor, to see him lose to the same guy 2 fights in a row. Obviously, there's still fights for him out there because he's Conor McGregor, but that would literally put an end to the championship days of Conor, in my opinion. If he were to lose to Khabib again, I think that would be it for him as a champion. Maybe I'm wrong, but what would he do? Go up to 170 and try to... I mean, the guys at 170 are way too big for him to fight. And 145, he killed himself to make that weight. So it's very tough. He's in a very interesting spot. And for being as big a fan of the sport as I am and as you are and as of Conor, to not know what's next, I think is very interesting. I'll also throw you this question. As far as your interest, you're heavily interested in Conor McGregor within the sport of MMA, but is there another fighter in mixed martial arts that you have really gravitated to, or is it just Conor? Is it just the fact that Conor has this charisma and personality that you just can't really deny?
I mean, there's a handful. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Cowboy Cerrone, I've always had a liking to. I mean, I like DJ Jones just before before he. So here's the thing. I feel like John Bones Jones hurts himself in every fight he does, whether he wins or loses, and it seems like all he does is win. The next thing he does is go out and lose a drug test. So
right.
He shoots himself in the foot after every single fight, or whether it's his last fight he wins and goes out and gets in a bar fight or whatever it was.
Right.
So I mean, I've gravitated towards Bones Jones. I kind of like him for what it is. Absolutely despise Daniel Cormier, but for what he is, he's one of the best fighters, and he brings all the attention. So
I have to get your take on that. Why do you not like Cormier? I'm curious.
There is something about Cormier the entire time I've ever seen him. His smug face on his body, and every time he loses, it seems like he's crying, asking for some kind of excuse. I mean, I'm sure you saw the memes when he lost the one fight, and he literally was crying.
Right.
And not to say that he's not emotionally invested in the sport. He probably is more emotionally invested than anybody, or most at least. But just the way I don't even know if I can put a finger on it, but just anytime I see him on a broadcast as an announcer, I am inclined to change the channel. I never do because I'm there for the fights. But I'm just really not here for his commentary, and I find myself in every single fight he's in praying that he, ends up on his back. And I just don't like anything about the guy, and I don't know what it is.
I find that interesting because I can kind of agree with you there. And I like Daniel Cormier, the fighter. I respect the way he has continued to battle through the adversity in his career, whether it's injuries or the fact that he is 40 years old doing what he's doing is pretty honorable. But there's always this question of his legitimacy because he never beat John Jones. And when he got that heavyweight title shot against Stipe Miocic, it was largely due to the fact that he had that UFC light heavyweight belt. They wanted to do a champion versus champion, heavyweight versus light heavyweight fight. He wins that. So it's almost like even him winning the heavyweight title has a little bit of this little, I don't want to say asterisk next to it, but it has this just this like energy that is just not legitimate. It's tough for me to legitimize him as the world heavyweight champ right now. And I don't know if he wins in August, to be honest. I don't know if he'll beat Stipe again.
No, I don't know if he does.
Yeah. That's going to be a big, big fight. But if you were a betting man, who do you think Conor will fight next?
So if there's one thing that I want the world to be clear of, I am, in fact, a betting man. There is no ifs or about it.
Right.
I am just straight up a betting man. If I'm putting money on who I think Conor fights next, I think you got to put a decent amount of money on Khabib. To your point, I think the UFC is money hungry enough where they would put together a potential rematch. I've always been itching for a McGregor Diaz 3. I wanted that trilogy, and
right.
I've been scratching at the window, hoping that it happens. And so far, to no avail. No one can hear me. No one's given me any time of day with that one. But I guess I would put the most money on Khabib. Maybe. Other than that, I would probably just put my money on the field. I think, like I said, it's a when, not if, that he fights again. I think it just all comes down and all boils down to who wants to take the chance on a possible murder in the venue if those two fight again.
I would hate to see that, and it really was an embarrassment. I had a lot of people that I work with, and my friends' moms even bought the fight. They were like, "This fight's really big. I really want to see this." And then that happens, and it just puts such a stain, and it's such an embarrassment on the sport that it really doesn't need right now.
It didn't look good for anybody.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you there. And I know you're a betting man. But I always say if, but I always, just throw that in there. But I know you are. I would bet Khabib. I would bet Nate. But as a little bit of a sleeper pick here, I would say Tony Ferguson could be a possibility for Conor McGregor. I want to throw that out there before we end the podcast today. But Kyle, I definitely appreciate you coming on the show. You've been doing some awesome work with the Trainwreck Sports guys, and I really enjoy working with those guys, and I know you do too.
Yeah, I mean, Trainwreck's been a whole heck of a different experience. I mean, they, I've been close with, obviously, a lot of the guys in Trainwreck just since my time at UB as an undergrad student. We kind of all developed this last March when we all took the train out to Cleveland, Alumni Arena West, to watch UB win the title. And I just sat down with Maniac and I said, "Hey man, I'm really interested in what you do. I'm really invested in, the whole trait. I'm just really invested, in everything that's going on here. So, how do I be a part of it? How can I join what's inevitably the heaviest force moving forward in Buffalo media?" And I stand by that. So I think
agree.
Realistically, I think the Trainwreck group of guys, we got something special going on. It's been incredible, working with you thus far. I mean, you and I have had plenty of back and forth, whether it's Twitter, text, the podcast.
Right.
This has been a story in its own. So
yeah,
by all means, this train literally never stops, and it will not continue. It'll continue not to stop just for the foreseeable future.
The train is on an endless road. The road just continue, or the tracks. The tracks just keep going and going and going, and it's so fun to communicate with those guys. Shout out to the guys at Trainwreck Sports, Degenerate Al, Maniac, Producer Burrs, Ty B, Josh Rest, yourself, just everybody. They are all awesome, and I've had a little bit of like a Trainwreck Sports guest tour the last week and a half, and I got to say everybody has been phenomenal. So I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to talking to you more in the future, Kyle.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I mean, I feel like I could probably rant on this kind of stuff all night long, so it's probably good someone throws in the towel.
Yeah, and I definitely will have you on again for sure. You always got a spot on this show.
Name the time and place. I'm there.
All righty. Sounds good, Kyle. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Have a great night.
You too. Kyle Hughes of Trainwreck Sports. And boy, that fired me up. I feel like I could run through a brick wall right now. He says that it is the biggest force in Buffalo sports media, Trainwreck Sports, and I would completely agree. What they got going on right now is something really special, and I'm so happy that I'll be a part of it. Continuing to work with Degenerate Al, continuing to work with Zach Sheldon and Ty B. We got a lot of really cool things planned for the football season, for the MMA season, which doesn't really have a season unless it's the PFL, the Professional Fighters League, but You get the point. A lot of stuff coming, a lot of great stuff to tune into. Follow me. Join the takeover at Ryan Thomas Take on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Take care, everybody.